Well, welcome everybody to this episode of Bits, Bytes, and Banter, where I'm delighted to be joined by Denise Breen. Denise, thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome, Gary. It's delighted to be here. It's Christmas Jumper Day.
I was just looking at that, and not only is that a Christmas Jumper Day, but you're giving away sort of your trekkiness.
Well, what can I say?
Have you got the hand? Can you do the hand thing?
I can do the hand thing. Absolutely.
Wow. And is that a sort of a thing among you Trekkies that the minute, like, I have to think about it and I've got to get that one? You just do it without even thinking.
I can do. Yes, yeah. It's
wow. As many hours. Yeah. You know, they say 10,000 hours of practice to perfect something. No.
So it's a very old symbol. Actually, there's a story behind it. I don't want to bore too many people, but Leonard Nimoy, who played Mr. Spock in the original TV series, he is of Jewish heritage, and when he was asked by the producers, just come up with some sort of a greeting, apparently this is an old Jewish symbol or old Jewish greeting, and that's what he used, and he added the words "live long and prosper" to it, and it's become part of the TV folklore now.
He was a fascinating, I know we're going off on a tangent, but it's always interesting. He was a fascinating character in his own right. Before he passed, I remember watching a documentary. He was a deep thinker.
He really was. Yeah.
And I'm not too sure Mr. Spock was a deep thinker. Very different personalities. Maybe that's why they had such marvelous connection on the show.
Yeah, he did. And I know we're going off on a tangent here, but he did struggle with the whole Spock thing, because he wrote a book like a few years after he left the series, and the book was called "I Am Not Spock," But then about 20 years after that, he wrote another book saying "I Am Spock," where he embraced the character and embraced the good fortune that the character brought him.
That's what I was going to suggest, is maybe it's a bit like looking at your bank balance diminishing and seeing maybe it's a better idea to associate with this wonderful character. But listen, characters, that's why you're here, because you are one, and because you I've always found discussions with you enlightening, to say the least. You've been in digital infrastructure for a while. You might have even been in digital infrastructure before it was called digital infrastructure.
Yeah, it's funny. As some folks may know, I recently started a new venture with Turner and Townsend, and when one of those kind of things where they send an email out to the whole company saying, Denise has joined us, one of the lines in the company in the email was, Denise has 40 years experience, and I kind of went, way to age a person.
Particularly if you're only 46. I thought that was cruel, right?
Very cruel. But I did, and I remember the date. It was the 19th of September, 1982, and probably before you were born, Gary, when I started my electrical apprenticeship with the ESB.
My goodness. You were that guy.
Yeah.
Wow. 1982. Did you go as far as the Leaving Cert, or was that
I was very fortunate. So this was the early 80s, and you remember what things were like in Ireland.
Yeah.
The ESB advertised for apprentices. There were 22,000 applications for 15 positions, and I was very fortunate to get one of those. And it was based on your aptitude tests, your inter-cert results, or your as junior cert, as it was called back then. And I got the letter telling me I was successful in getting the place as an apprentice the day before I started my Leaving Cert.
Wow.
So the pressure was off a little bit.
That's fantastic, because a lot of the lads and girls would have left probably after the junior cert or the group cert, as it was called then. So to get a Leaving Cert and a result and an apprenticeship, that was slightly unusual, I think, right back then.
I suppose it was unusual, but I suppose it stood to me because as part of my Leaving Cert, I did honours maths and that sort of stuff. So when I went on to do electrical engineering, that was, yeah, it was a little bit easier for me to do that when in Kevin Street,
In
which
Kevin Street. Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
which I was passing by Kevin Street the other day, and it's gone. It's a hole in the
Where,
ground.
where is it now? Grange Gorman, is it? Is
Yeah,
it they
Grange Park,
consolidated?
yeah, yeah,
Oh yeah, Kevin Street. I was a Bolton Street boy myself, but Kevin Street were all the lads that had intelligence, and I was down with the architects and all these people. I was a geo surveyor, and all I remember about the course was chains in King's Inns, which got you
yeah.
half a day off because it was good pubs the other side of King's Inn. But that's sorry, Mr. Brennan. Sorry. Can we just talk for a second and just go back to the word apprenticeship?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a huge snobbery around that word.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a transition of our society or other societies, but everybody wanted their kids to go to university. Go to university, be the first in the family to go to university and get a knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's somehow demeaned, and yet so many people like yourself, like Tommy Fitz on the show recently, brilliant careers, apprenticeships, discipline, work balance, a bit of education, a bit of work, that sort of learning through work. What's your own view, having gone through it?
Yeah, I actually wrote an article, it's a couple of years ago now, and published it on LinkedIn about apprenticeships, and the article was called, Give Apprenticeships a Second Look, because a lot of the 15 people that I serve my time with in the ESB, I look at where they've all gone, and now I won't mention any of them, but some of them have gone on to run their own businesses, and very successful businesses in this industry, and I suppose it's a couple of things. One, it gives you the practical experience. So when I go on construction sites, when I talk to design teams, when I talk to general contractors, when I talk to the subcontractors, you're speaking the same language. You have pulled that cable, you have installed that cable tray, you have installed and commissioned that switchgear. You understand the issues that they're faced with. So it does break down a lot of barriers, and I suppose apprenticeships. I mean, I remember those 4 years have been very special. I jumped on my bicycle, cycling into Kevin Street, or cycling into the training school in Mount Street, as it was, the ESB training school, eager to learn, because every day you are learning something new. You were going out on sites, you're doing, as a utility, you're doing things that most apprentices never got a chance to do, whether it be, overhead cabling, underground joints and repairs, whatever it may be. It was a great grounding experience.
Pardon the pun. Pardon the pun.
Yes, pardon the pun. Yeah. But,
did you ever get grounded yourself?
Oh, yeah. Doing for those of you who may have done this, doing 10 kV or 20 kV cable joints live is a very interesting experience.
Right. And when we say live, it's really live.
Live, yeah. It'd be very rare to do it these days, but back in the 80s, they were done live. Yeah, they were
Health
done live.
And safety maybe wasn't quite the same.
Yeah, was a little different. Now, all LV joints were done live. A lot of medium volt joints were done live. You probably wouldn't do as much these days, but the systems were there, and it was a great learning experience, and
one of the things
very fun.
One of the things that Tommy actually said to me, and also listening to others that have gone through, you learn a sense of discipline and application. You have to be disciplined. You have to apply yourself. And maybe if education isn't, particularly when you look at the amount of first year fallouts in the university system, it's quite, I can't remember the number now, but I remember seeing it was 15-18%, and that's a high number.
Yeah, it is high.
A high number. And a lot of them seem to be, I didn't know, I chose the wrong course, or a lot of them didn't realize the work had to be done by them.
Yeah.
And those people find ways of getting into other work, but it seems
do,
quite
yeah.
high.
I mean, the one thing I would put a lot of value in is aptitude testing. So we're all brought up to think, go through school, get your leaving cert, go to college, get a degree, get a job. Um, so I would put a lot of store in aptitude testing. And I look back to that time. My parents wanted me to be an accountant,
Right.
and I, yeah, I could not imagine being an accountant. They want me to go to university and be an accountant. No, I wanted to be an apprentice electrician. I wanted to be an electrician. That was just something that I had loved from a very early age. And big shout out to grandparents. My grandparents were great champions for me and said, let her go be an apprentice. It's what she wants to do. Let her go do it. You know, and the aptitude testing that was done then obviously was great because I loved it. I loved the 4 years of it. And I apologies to anyone who may be from the ESB or listening. The ESB gave great opportunities. So if you wanted to do further study in the evening, they would help you do that and support that. And so that's what I did. Some people will be familiar with the old City and Guilds exams, the 236s, the 803s, and
Wow.
did all of those in the evening. So you'd be working, doing your full day as an apprentice, and then you'd be in Kevin Street from 7 till 10 in the evening, 4 nights a week, studying as well.
Well, I did all of those aptitude tests and all of those tests for P&T. I think it was Post and Telecom or
Yeah,
Telecom.
yeah.
And I failed them all miserably. So I always wanted to meet the guy, because I would have been 82, 83 myself. I always wanted to meet the guy or girl who did get the 15 places. So I've now met you, the 6%. What then? So obviously that was you were working for a transmission company. You were getting inside buildings, outside buildings. You were seeing high voltage, low voltage. How did one end up working in Amazon and Google and all these wonderful data companies then? What was the connection?
I think my journey was very similar to a lot of people, and in fact, a lot of companies in Ireland. In Ireland, we have a great track record in the 80s with pharmaceutical industry. In the 90s, Intel came here, and in the 90s, then it was data centers and digital infrastructure. So I grew up with all of that. I had the opportunity to join some great consultancies. I was with Arup for a few years. I was with IDC or CH2M, now part of Jacobs. I was with them for 10 years. I was at PM Group for 10 years. And you mentioned Google. I remember when I was in PM Group, making a cup of tea one day, and one of our directors, Mick Lynham, said to me, he was in the kitchen making a cup of tea. He said, "What do you know about data centers?" And I said, "Oh, I did one a few years ago." And he says, "I'm meeting these people called Google tomorrow. Will you come in?" And so that's how you get involved. A lot of the
Put yourself in the position is what you're saying. You find yourself in the position.
It also can be luck, and you can be very fortunate as well too.
Isn't it extraordinary? Foreign direct investment, for those listening, particularly international, I don't think people quite realize the positive effect it's had, not only in Ireland, but in giving people confidence to go from Ireland. We were away, you and I, during the week in London. I don't know if you stood up and looked around the room, but I'd say at least 60% of the people had a connection with Ireland, outside of Ireland. And that confidence of building a wafer fab, or that confidence of building a pharmaceutical plant in Cork, gives you the grounding to say, these data centers, they may be bigger and faster, but I'm not sure they're at the same level of an FDA approval or confidence.
Yeah. So I went straight from, I spent 7 or 8 years out in Intel as kind of electrical lead for some of the fabs out there, and then moving into data centers. I found data centers not as complex as wafer fabs. You're right, faster, more agile, but you have that grounding in wafer fabs, mission critical, which stands to people when they're working in the data center industry.
Well, I'm adding all these. I think your marketing person was right. I'm adding up all these years you're talking, and I've worked out 2 10-year treks and 1 7. So that's 20. That's 27 years. I want your elixir of life. Are you actually called Benjamin Button? maybe this is what's happening. You're getting younger.
Young
Because
person, yeah.
I'm 27 years not, and I can anyway. So you're in the middle of, let's call it digital transformation, because there's
Yeah.
nothing in the planet right now, including the great challenge of climate change, that we can reverse without using data. And I think that's one of the things that we all try and get across to those that when they ask us, why do I need all these data centers? Because only 7% of what you're seeing is social media. The other 93% is everything else from hospitals right the way through.
Yeah.
Are you encouraged? Are you excited? Do you feel you're pioneer, in some of these, or is it all about giving back and talent development and teaching people? And I hear you a lot talking about sort of trying to get across to people, this isn't the first mission critical industry that is ever in the world. So let's learn from that. We're building out an asset class in the digital infrastructure, but they built a lot of hotels in the 70s and 80s when tourism became a thing. So, I hear the experience coming through you all the time about let's put things in context. But what's exciting you? Are you excited?
Do you know what? I am excited. Data centers is something that I kind of scare people when I say I did my first data center in the last century, and it was you mentioned P&T, their successor Aircom. That was the very first data center I ever did out in City West, and that was back in the late 90s. I like to see the technology evolving. Back then we were cooling data centers, as I say, from below raised access floors. Later on, we were cooling data centers from the side. We were flooding the room. Some are now cooling data centers from above. And so I'm excited to see, immersion and all those new technologies, seeing how they apply. I know they apply in small scale, how they can apply in larger scale. So I love all that. But I also, what gets me up in the morning, what really excites me, and you mentioned the DCD Awards in London this week. I look around the room and I see a lot of gray hair. Okay.
I wish I had some. You weren't talking about me.
No. What really excites me and what I really love to see is the next generation coming along. And I love mentoring and supporting and seeing the next generation coming along and knocking it out of the park. That's really where I get a thrill from these days. And seeing that happen. And I think that's what we have to do. I think there is a huge, we all know there's a shortage of talent in the data center industry, and a lot of industries, but particular data center. And the industry itself does get a lot of bad press. Those of us who are in it and working it every day, we understand what it is. We understand the good that it can do. But it does get a lot of negative coverage in the media. And I know the work that you and the team do and host Nara and Gary is great at promoting the good that data centers do. We need more of them.
I guess it's the why, isn't it? You're trying to constantly, and you guys teach me and you teach me as well. A lot of people talk about what it is. It's a box and it has a raw material, which is electricity. But very few people in the industry actually know the why as well.
Yeah. I've sat with a couple of politicians, over the years who have contacted me and said, "Oh, I have a constituency meeting or I have a meeting in the Dáil, and I need you to explain data centers to me and why they're so bad." And then when I explain to them what data centers actually do, you mentioned hospital records and health records all stored in the cloud, and how surgeons can access a patient's records in an operating theater. They have the information, it is live, it lives in the cloud. A lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand where their online banking lives, where their Netflix lives, where their Disney Plus lives, where when they're tweeting to complain about data centers, they don't understand where the tweet lives. So when you sit down and explain to them, it's like an eye-opening moment for them. And I think we need to do more of that. But we also need to get more efficient. We do. As an industry, we have to do that.
I was just going to say that to you, is that Google, one of the people you mentioned earlier, Google came out this week and they are talking now about 5 times the amount of data out for the same electron in through efficiencies and changing to immersive cooling and geographic location choices and all this type of stuff. Do you think that with at one end, the speed of acceleration, because there's still 2.8 billion people who don't have access of the 8 billion to any digital services, never mind 5G. So with the speed of acceleration on one end, do we get sucked into the trap because of the speed that we want to just cookie cut and say whatever we had there, we'll just go there, and missing this opportunity to be more efficient, to not look at, do you think we have a risk with the speed of delivery and not using the findings and the learnings to make the next one more efficient?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pressures there. I think efficiency can sometimes cost more in the beginning.
Yes.
You know, you mentioned Google. I was very fortunate to deliver the campus in Hamina, which uses seawater cooling, and it's one of the most efficient campuses in the world, and it's fantastic. Uses seawater, so it has a very low PUE, but that requires investment and infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a cost to be that efficient, and then there's a price point. You know, everyone is looking for data to be stored at the lowest possible cost. And it's where those two things meet, I think, where we as an industry need to get our heads around. I don't think we have our heads around that yet. I think there's, pressure from all the companies who are looking for cloud storage. There's the companies who are building that storage, having to meet a price point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the
They're
dichotomy.
different individuals. You probably know better than I do. They're two different types of people in the organization.
Yeah.
One's facilities, there's a bit of IT there, and there's obviously the spreadsheet guy. And you don't have to be in a cloud provider to understand those three don't always see eye to eye even when you're making shoelaces.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have all these dynamics going on, and yet the data in the centers is the digital equivalent of the steam in the first industrial revolution. So that's the bit that it all comes back to. The one thing that's constant over the last 40 years, and I have a floppy disk in my pocket, actually. I take it out anytime anybody wants to know what a data center is. I just take out the floppy disk and I say that's that on steroids, because again, to your point earlier, trying to get people to relate in pictures to something they do understand is a key thing to bringing people forward to understand what a data center does. People relate to a floppy disk, particularly people of my generation. Oh, I remember my first floppy disk, and one had the application and one saved the data. And if you went by a truck and you wiped it, it actually gets them sort of connected. And then you say, you know what? When was the last time you saw one of them? Well, I haven't in forever. That's because it's in a thing called a cloud in the data center. So change is constant. I know you do a huge amount outside of your professional work in change and in talking and trying to get society to accept change. When do you ever find it conflicts that I've got to go to X and be this person in a data center world, but I also have my other responsibilities? Do you love that mix? Do you love that sort of, do they cross over?
Yeah, do you know what? They actually have a lot of synergies. Because wherever I go, whether it's the data center world or any of the advocacy work that I do, it's still Denise Breen. It's still me. And that's the one thing I love. I say there are some synergies there, in that people and the construction industry is probably one of the last dinosaurs. It has changed enormously in the last 10 years. It's not changing fast enough, but it is changing. No, I don't see that there's any challenge between the roles that I do. I see there's great synergy between them, because all you want to do is for people to come to work, bring themselves to work, their entire selves to work, because there's so much research out there that shows that for companies, you get better outcomes for projects. It improves the bottom line. You get less staff turnover, more retention. So we have a lot of work to do in that advocacy, in getting people to accept people for who they are. And we could do a whole other half hour on that. But
I remember my mother told me a long time ago, Gary, try and be yourself because everybody else is taken.
yeah, yeah,
And it was a funny thing because you didn't really know what she was saying. And now, and sometimes the pendulum seems to go and it gets hijacked by other people who just want a narrative to hijack. And, it gets mixed and it gets lost. But, authenticity, be your authentic self, but you must behave like this. Be your authentic self, but you must wear a suit. Be your authentic self, or don't wear flip-flops, as I saw Elon Musk said this week, no shorts and flip-flops. Well, I think this is an oxymoron.
there is. And look, it's one of the things that fascinates me, and I probably will write something about it someday, is how things have changed for me since I transitioned.
Yes.
From being sitting at a table where people would listen to your voice and listen to your opinion, to now sitting at a table where you get talked over. And I'm sure any women on the call here today we can empathize with this, where you get talked over, where your opinions don't count as much as they used to. Now, I find that really strange because I'm the same person. I have the same experiences, the same knowledge, but yet there's a perception, and we have a lot to do to work on that.
You have such a unique insight and angle on that from both sides. That's extraordinary. I hadn't even thought about that for a nanosecond. So what you're saying is 10 years ago, same project, everybody's listening intently.
Yeah.
10 years later, same person. Yes, that's just striking.
Yeah. It's not unique to me. Okay.
But having these discussions. Wow. Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. People open doors for me now that they never opened doors before.
Yeah.
That's lovely. That's lovely.
Yeah.
But it's that whole gender balance in the design and construction industry is something we are talking about it, and I think we need to talk some more about it.
Yeah, but it's a little bit like this emotional intelligence that we're all meant to be much more aware of now. It's hard to have empathy when you haven't had empathy with someone how sore a broken arm is until you broke your arm, because you've no first-hand experience. That's a really unique lens that you look at. My own daughter just went through the driving thing, the 2 years of an N and stuff.
Oh yeah,
and she told me overnight, took the N off. Drivers are so much different to her. Up to the end, you'd think they'd be the opposite. You'd think with the N, you'd get more wiggle room. She said, no. You have the N on there, you're nearly bait to be honked at, So we've only a few more minutes to go, but I have to bring us back to where we started. Because along with all this advocacy work, and along with all this digital infrastructure work, you still find time to be a critique of movies. I mean, what do? Do you just look at your diary and say, oh, I've 15 minutes and I must fill it by looking at this movie? You love that. I read them regularly.
Yeah.
And Greg Norman, was it Greg Norman? No. What was
Harry
it?
Norman. Harry Norman. Harry Norman. Yeah.
Yeah, him. Except for the music. So where's that come from? Is that just an inquisitive mind?
It's just I love film, and I used to talk to people about film, and they'd say, well, why don't you write that down? So if people read them, that's fantastic. If they don't, it really is just, for me, it's like cathartic. Just put my thoughts down on paper, and don't forget the radio work as well, Gary. That's the other thing that takes up my Saturdays, which is
that on Mead or Kildare Radio? Kildare, Mead, what is it?
Yes, it's the commercial station for Kildare. Yeah, KFM. Yeah.
Is that straight up DJ, or is it a
straight up DJ? So tomorrow, Saturday morning, here's the plug: 11 to 2, the Saturday show. You can tune in anywhere around the world.
What's your genre? What's your preferred genre?
Commercial radio station. So I'm if anyone's listening, I apologize. I'm fully playlisted, so I don't have a choice in the music.
Fully playlisted, okay.
It's yeah.
Well, do you know what? You said earlier, there's on each one of those points we've touched on over the last 30 minutes, whether it's apprenticeships, whether it's managing change, whether it's advocacy, whether it's music. What one thing that comes across, and it's true, really interesting people have lots of shit going on.
Yeah.
Isn't it true? I mean, I don't know if you've ever met a fella who is brilliant on electrons, and he's brilliant at electrons, desperately boring after you lean out of the discussion about electrons. Interesting people I find are broad. They've bits and bits and bits and bits. And you certainly are broad.
Yeah. Look, I love it. I've been very lucky, very fortunate, and I have a lot of irons in the fire. And I see people who spend a lifetime in this industry and then they retire and they're bored. I'm never bored.
No,
I'm never bored.
I can't see you being. So it's been a real pleasure. It took us a while. I had to wait till you settled somewhere for at least a moment to get you onto the show, but it really has been everything I'd hoped. Denise Breen, best of luck with your new role. Keep doing what you're doing because it's working. And it has been a genuine pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gary. It's been a real honor to be here, and I love the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.